The other thing I'm going to do is have you come out to the aisle, and I'll give you the microphone. And then I'll move to the next person out into the aisle. And that will save a little time of people getting out and coming up here. And so I'll just have you come to the aisle.
You're better without the microphone.
Okay, thanks. Rebecca Proctor is our first presenter. After Rebecca, we have Charlotte Levinson on deck. There's Rebecca and then Charlotte here. Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me okay? My name is Rebecca Proctor. I'm a professional archaeologist of 36 years. I'm speaking tonight as a private citizen and as a representative of the New Mexico Site Watch program. I think there's going to be a lot of passion here tonight, and I think that I don't really have to go there just yet. So I'll keep my comments as close to the technical as possible. But I don't want anyone here to think that that means that I don't understand the incredible potential for destruction to the things that I've spent my life trying to understand, explore, and protect. My technical comments are as follows. I'm a little concerned at the rapidity with which BLM has gone toward the environmental assessment phase, or that stage of evaluation for the NEPA process. I feel that I don't even have to worry about citing technical data. I feel pretty confident that the areas that are going to be impacted here could easily, under BLM's own criteria, many of these areas could be considered parts of an ACEC, an area of critical environmental concern. I don't believe we have one defined for the areas that the pipeline may cross, but I believe that it's entirely possible that we're at that level of sensitivity with some of these things. I know that the size of an area, a proposed project area, or the relative level of previous disturbance, or the relative level of what I'm seeing being called the human environment, is not necessarily, those are not necessarily limiting factors on the decision whether to do an EIS, a higher level of NEPA evaluation, and an environmental impact statement, rather than an EA. And it concerns me that we've gone very quickly down this road of an environmental assessment. I'm not sure that's warranted. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. After Charlotte, we have Teresa Seamster.
Thank you. I'm Charlotte Levinson, and I'm going there. I wonder how many people are here because they have grave concerns about this project? That's what I thought. So I have a prepared statement. It is 7 minutes long, but that's what it is. I'll read it. So I'm Charlotte Levinson. I'm a resident of Santa Fe for 22 years and a volunteer with Frack Free New Mexico. I run an environmental foundation. My work focuses on the juncture of climate, energy, people, and nature. In October, I received notice that this office was about to sell 20,000 acres of the Santa Fe National Forest to oil companies for fracking that morning. I called my good friend Marielle Nanasi, who said, "I'll be right over." We drove down here in her electric car to protest the sale. We were 5 minutes too late that day. We were disappointed, but we knew that once word got out, there would be huge interest, and that Don't Frack the Santa Fe National Forest, Save Chaco Canyon, No Pinon Pipeline is a winning campaign. As I looked into it more, I discovered the oil industry was promoting an entirely new endeavor, the fracking of the Mancos Shale in the San Juan Basin. I learned that Tom Udall and Martin Heinrich had sponsored a bill speeding up shale oil drilling permits, and that a major new pipeline was planned, the Pinon Pipeline, now a gathering system. I learned that some of the projects were already being carried out, even though there has not been the legally required public planning process and comparing of alternatives, so that's what we're here for now. BLM lands are public lands. Decision about their use, you need to be in the best interest of the public, with public input and participation. Same goes for tribal lands. The fact that 80 concerned citizens braved bad roads and weather to give public comments at the Farmington meeting 2 days ago and were not permitted to speak at the meeting is a grievance that needs to be redressed. I challenge the way BLM is making decisions. I challenge the rationale for shale oil fracking anywhere in New Mexico. First, the economics. The price of crude oil is falling below levels sufficient for energy companies to service their huge debts to investment banks, even though the oil industry is publicly subsidized to the tune of $6 billion a year. The oil industry is taking heavy losses and would probably love to be let out of their leases on the Santa Fe National Forest. One thing is clear, the shale oil boom is over, the carbon bubble is bursting. Quote, economists and industry analysts expect a sharp deceleration in production this year. The energy sector is in a recession. That's Charles Peabody, banking specialist at Portales Partners. American Eagle Energy Corporation Denver has suspended its 2015 drilling budget. Barrel of oil reached 2014 price peak of $107 in June before dropping below $44 today. That's below the break-even price for 37 of 38 U.S. shale oil fields, according to Bloomberg Financial. The average decline of how much a given, I'm going to go for 7 minutes. The average decline of how much a given well produces is 44%. You'll just take more time doing that. The average decline of how much a given well produces, this is like how much a decline, is 44% per year. Individual wells can see production declines of 70% or more in the first year alone. With their financing vanishing and oil prices staying low, most of the frackers will simply be out of business in a year because they will have stopped producing enough oil for their business model. That's the reason why the Saudis, with their conventional oil production, can wait out the frackers. Meanwhile, a new report out today says the solar installation sector beat out the oil and gas pipeline construction industry and crude oil and natural gas extraction industry in 2014, creating almost 50% more jobs than those industries did. Environmental impacts. The BLM's premature approval of Maine Coast shale drilling is threatening the region's air, water, land, fish, wildlife, and people, and undermining our nation's progress in reducing greenhouse gases and combating climate change. BLM needs to acknowledge and disclose that water used for fracking is never usable again. One well uses approximately 1 million gallons. That's fresh water, irretrievably gone from the life cycle. Failed wells and oil spills contaminate groundwater and rivers. Mobil Oil, ExxonMobil, Texaco have had to pay a combined $8.5 million here during the last decade for pollution violations, including dozens of spills that reach the tributaries of the San Juan River, the region's lifeblood. Fracking produces fissures that allow chemicals to migrate into water sources, chemicals whose names we are prohibited from knowing due to the Halliburton loophole of 2005 that exempts the fracking industry from provisions of the Safe Water Drinking Act, the Clean Air Act, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, the Superfund Act, and the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act. Ask yourselves why the oil and gas industry needs to be exempt from all those laws. Almost done. Where oil and gas development goes, health problems follow. Volatile organic compounds used in fracking damage the lungs, liver, kidneys, blood, and brain. A Colorado School of Public Health study shows that air pollution caused by fracking is contributing to acute and chronic health problems for those living near drilling sites. Coalition of Environmental and Community-Based Groups in Colorado and New Mexico collected air samples that showed 22 toxic chemicals ranging from 3,000 to 3,000 times higher than what is considered safe by state and federal agencies. The sampling was conducted in the San Juan Basin. In October, NASA announced there's a 2,500 square mile methane plume over the Four Corners, the largest such concentration ever detected. Methane is at least 20 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2, and according to the National Institutes of Health, an asphyxiant, a chokehold. The discovery prompted President Obama to propose a plan to cut down on methane leaks from oil and gas drilling by 45% by 2025. There are a great many more impacts, from cultural resources to endangered species to lost opportunity costs. Most importantly, the continuing subjugation of the Diné and other indigenous people is unacceptable. Oil and gas didn't bring wealth to the people, yet the resource that comes out of their homeland produces millions and millions of dollars for oil companies, shareholders, and executives. The Navajo Nation is one of the 10 richest in land and resources in the country, but it is also one of the 10 poorest, where over 50% of the people are unemployed. Quote from tribal member, when the oil and gas came into the Four Corners area, Navajos expected jobs. I think that's when a lot of people first experienced the extreme discrimination that the oil companies had. They brought in their own people, and they would not hire the local folks to do the work, he said. Basically, they just took over the area, and Navajo became a second-class citizen. To finish, the lost opportunity costs, public health problems, environmental impacts, climate instability, denial of human and civil rights associated with all fossil fuel mining, drilling, fracking, processing, burning, transporting, and waste are no longer acceptable to a great many of the world's institutions and people. Even the Pope says get off fossil fuels. The legacy of the Keystone XL pipeline fight has become organized and galvanized local resistance to new energy infrastructure nationwide and worldwide, with youth and frontline communities in the lead. Regulators and land managers may not be set up for this kind of challenge on political questions as how fast we can change the energy economy. That's the job of our coalitions, our movement. Clearly, what's already over is the era of easy pipelines. We are rising up everywhere. We are bold, resilient, strategic, resourceful, powerful. We are the climate justice movement, and we won't stop.
For the record, 8.5 minutes. Thank you, Ms. Levinson.
I got a question. Are we going to follow the process, or are we just going to let
It would be
people
most
run for as
respectful
long
to
as they
everyone
want?
if we could keep to the time limits. This is simply because we want to fit everyone in and respect the space that we're in.
If you really
Please.
respect this, would give us the time we needed to make a community statement.
And that is why the NEPA process includes 60 days for giving comment via email, written comment. You can even give oral comments in other methods, but for these meetings, we just ask that you respect the time limit here. After Ms. Seamster, we have Marlene Parati. Marlene? Oh, you're after this one. I just wanted to make sure I knew where you were. Ms. Seamster.
Well, I don't know if anyone can top that. I'm Teresa Seamster. I'm representing the Rio Grande chapter of Sierra Club. Sierra Club has 10,000 members in the state, and in the last 4 days we've gotten over 1,000 comments. So that's 1 out of 10 responding in about 2 or 3 days with their deep concerns about the impacts of this project statewide, not just in the San Juan Basin. This project, I'm going to just try to abbreviate this down to 1 minute. This project has raised issues in so many areas. Essentially, the pipeline will quadruple the oil production and the extraction in the San Juan Basin. This enormous jump in drilling, fracking, methane flaring, and piping oil has raised a lot of local government concerns and public and economic concerns, and I'll just address a few of them that Charlotte might have missed in that impressive presentation. Public health issues are huge in oil field areas. There are many oil field related. Is this okay? There are many oil field related illnesses caused by liquid hydrocarbon fumes, water contaminated from well discharge, construction and access roads that produce excessive dust, and just the emissions that are associated with the fracking and the flaring. The health impact assessments and medical studies show that the science has lagged in the area of oil field-related illness and the associated cost to public health services. Chris Portier, the director of the National Center for Environmental Health, says, quote, in some communities, drilling has been a disaster. We do not have enough information on hand to be able to draw good, solid conclusions about whether this is a public risk as a whole. Exemption from federal environmental rules that were won by the drilling companies have complicated efforts of agencies to gather pollution data and to understand the root of health issues. We've already heard about a lot of the other associated issues. Health is related to air and water quality. It's related to stress and noise pollution. In some of these areas, just the environmental impacts of having that much traffic and construction in their backyard is overwhelming. There are public safety issues due to pipeline accidents, unsafe road conditions, and heavy traffic. In some areas, particularly down in Jal, where there's been a long history of oil field development, they have very high increased levels of crime. They have unsafe roads to the point where they cannot send school buses down those roads to get children from the home to the school. There are eminent domain issues. There's loss of private land value. Due to being in a gas zone proximity, there are loss of home mortgages due to homeowners granting a pipeline easement on their property. If they do that, they can immediately have their bank call them and reclaim the mortgage because they have altered the conditions of that home mortgage. They also can find themselves unable to resell their land, and they also could lose their residential insurance rate, which could jump to a commercial rate due to the pipeline's presence. I won't go through a lot of the other ones, but in terms of San Juan County, I used to live up there about 10 years ago, and in terms of what the tribal governments might incur in terms of extra cost, they are the ones responsible for repairing infrastructure and roads. They have to respond to accidents. They have to clean up spills that are outside of the 45-foot right-of-way. They have to mitigate water contamination, and they have to provide for the loss of public water supplies. I think at this point I'll just go to the ask. Sierra Club members would like to see this process stopped. They would like to see an EIS required on this pipeline. They would like to see some funding of a health impact assessment for these communities. And I think there's a whole issue we really haven't discussed yet that is part of NEPA, which is the Council on Environmental Quality, that requires a collective greenhouse gas impact of any intensive energy project like this. This is in the draft form right now, but BLM is well aware of it. This is a requirement that you do an evaluation of the cumulative impact of this project along with all other projects. It's a pipeline here and a pipeline there that collectively has a huge impact. So that assessment would be our final request. Thank you.
After Ms. Karate, we'll hear from Samantha Ruskovich Bars. Samantha?
Good evening. I'm Sister Marlene, and I would like to address the BLM. You folks have been given a sacred trust, protecting and preserving our future. And I want to emphasize the public discourse. When we do the public discourse, I think we have to consider the public trust doctrine, that the commonwealth is for the common good, not for the oil and gas industry and to feed our addiction. The second principle is the Earth Charter. One does not do the that is against the ethical dimensions of our future. The second one, and I think this is the third one, is the precautionary principle. The precautionary principle states that if an action could harm the public or the environment, the burden of proof falls on those advocating the action. I think the BLM has not done its duty to give permits for drilling. I think that unless the oil and gas industry can prove that it is not going to harm us, then it should be done. And the other one is environmental justice. I think this is a very critical issue. I'm not sure we would want the pipeline in our backyards. And I think the journey of these pipelines have been on the water sources. And here we are in a desert. And the last one, the effect on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. After Joan Brown, we'll hear from Anna, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, Sofer, and Anna, okay, thank you.
I'm Samantha Ruscavage Bars, and I'm proud to work for Wild Earth Guardians and to be here to speak for them tonight. Guardians diligently protects air and water, cultural and natural landscapes from rampant, uncontrolled, unlimited energy development. And that's just what we see here. This meeting tonight is supposed to be for scoping about the Pinion Pipeline, the Saddle Butte Pipeline. This pipeline is part of full-scale development of the Manco Shale Formation up in the Four Corners area in northwest New Mexico. The Manco Shale development is going to be through horizontal fracking. It's going to impact communities. It's going to impact Chaco Canyon, which is a World Heritage Site, and it's going to impact natural resources, air quality, water quality. BLM is already admitted that while it is currently approving Manco Shale wells, it has never analyzed the environmental impacts of horizontal drilling. So BLM does not know what the impacts of this kind of development will be. Yet we see from the pipeline that there is already infrastructure being put in place. And by simply doing an environmental assessment, an EA document for the pipeline, it's being treated as a single project in isolation of all of the other development. So the ask that Wild Earth Guardians has for BLM is that you need to include the Pinion Pipeline, analyze the environmental impacts of it,